The hiss of magnetic tape unspooling in the dark. A distorted voice feeding your deepest fears directly into your skull, on an infinite loop. You cannot cover your ears. The static hum of machinery vibrates through the cold linoleum floors. Heavy doors lock from the outside, sealing away screams that were never meant to be recorded. They told you it was a sanctuary to heal your broken mind. But inside the walls of the sleep room, patients aren't resting. They are in drug-induced comas, trapped in an artificial twilight. The air is sterile, heavy with the scent of barbiturates and thorazine. The only sound is the mechanical hum of tape recorders. Reel-to-reel machines spinning endlessly in the shadows. From speakers hidden under pillows, voices emerge. Distorted. Relentless. You are a bad mother. You are inadequate. You are a failure. Playing over and over, hundreds of thousands of times. This auditory assault is the brainchild of Dr. Donald Ewan Cameron, one of the most respected psychiatrists in the world. He isn't trying to cure these people. He is trying to erase them. The process is called depatterning. The objective is horrifyingly simple: wipe the human mind completely blank, like a cassette tape recorded over with harsh static. Destroy the personality, the memories, the very essence of the individual, so a new one can be built from scratch. It is funded secretly by the CIA under MKUltra subproject 68. The subjects aren't enemy spies or hardened soldiers. They are ordinary citizens. Housewives struggling with postpartum depression, like Velma Orlikow. Teenagers with anxiety. People who simply asked for medical help. Instead, they find their minds methodically dismantled piece by piece. The tapes never stop. Day and night, the loop continues. It is psychological vivisection. The patients can't cover their ears. They can't walk away. They are chemically bound to their beds, helpless against the relentless invasion of their own consciousness. What happens when the only voice you hear for months is the one telling you that you are absolutely nothing? Dr. Ewan Cameron wasn't a fringe mad scientist operating in a secret underground bunker. He was the establishment. He served as the president of the American Psychiatric Association, the Canadian Psychiatric Association, and the World Psychiatric Association. His peers revered him. He genuinely believed that mental illness could be cured by tearing down the mind and rebuilding it through a method he called psychic driving. But before he could drive new, positive messages into a patient's brain, he had to shatter the existing mental structures. This was the depatterning phase, a brutal, unforgiving regimen of extreme electroconvulsive therapy. Cameron didn't use standard ECT. He used the Page-Russell method. Multiple massive shocks a day, sometimes for 30 to 60 days straight. Shock after shock until the patients forgot their own names. Until they forgot how to walk. Until they forgot how to control their bodily functions. They were reduced to an infantile state, crying in the dark, completely devoid of their former selves. Once the mind was sufficiently fractured and pliant, the psychic driving began. This was the true, agonizing horror of subproject 68. Cameron would record his patients during private therapy sessions, coaxing them to reveal their deepest insecurities, their guilt, and their traumas. He would then isolate these negative statements, edit them onto a tape loop, and play them back to the patient endlessly. Hundreds of thousands of repetitions. Imagine your darkest secret, your worst fear, played on an infinite loop, piped directly into your brain while you lie paralyzed in a dark room. He wanted to break the will, to crack open the human soul like a walnut. But as the magnetic reels kept spinning in the sterile dark, a terrifying question emerged. Once a mind is broken into a million jagged pieces, can it ever truly be put back together? When the patients instinctively resisted the intrusive, looping voices, the doctor escalated the psychological torture, ensuring the artificial trauma would penetrate far deeper into the helpless subconscious. He demanded the immediate construction of specialized, brutally effective equipment designed for absolute sensory subjugation. Standard audio simply wasn't enough, the sound needed to become physical. Heavy football helmets were violently modified, meticulously rigged with large, heavy-duty speakers mounted directly over the ears, creating an inescapable chamber of auditory terror. The subjects were roughly strapped down to their cold, metallic beds with thick leather restraints. The altered helmets were then locked tightly onto their heads, the straps biting deep into their skin. The tape loops began to play at deafening, skull-shattering volumes. There was absolutely no escape. No turning away. The relentless sound vibrated violently through the fragile bones of their skulls, shaking their teeth in their gums. Some patients desperately fought back against the mechanical nightmare. They thrashed wildly, attempting to rip the heavy helmets off, tearing fiercely at the restrictive leather straps until their fingers bled profusely and their fingernails cracked and splintered against the unyielding buckles. The air grew thick with the sterile smell of medical panic and cold sweat. To ruthlessly counter this final, desperate human instinct for survival, the doctor introduced curare, a powerful paralytic toxin historically used on lethal poison darts. The injection was swift. The patients were instantly, terrifyingly frozen in place. They remained completely, painfully conscious. Unable to move a single muscle, unable to blink or scream, they lay paralyzed while the mechanical voices hammered relentlessly into their helpless brains. The fluorescent lights overhead emitted a sickly, low-frequency hum, matching the relentless drone of the magnetic tape. A waking, inescapable nightmare orchestrated in a clinically sterile room. What kind of doctor deliberately paralyzes his own helpless patients just to forcefully drown them in their own manufactured despair? The doctor constructed a highly specialized, deeply unsettling environment meticulously designed to drastically amplify the suffocating horror of his psychic driving experiments. He coldly referred to it as the grid room. It was an advanced sensory isolation chamber, engineered from the ground up to break the human spirit completely and permanently. There was no natural light. There were no windows to the outside world. Just a solitary, suspended bed floating in the center, a highly sensitive microphone hanging ominously overhead, and the ever-present, monolithic speakers bolted to the walls. To ensure the absolute minimum of physical sensation, the patient's limbs were encased entirely in stiff, restricted cardboard tubes, a crude but effective method to prevent them from even feeling the comforting touch of their own skin. The air inside the chamber was stagnant, heavily laced with the sterile smell of chemical cleaners and the distinct, metallic tang of cold sweat. It was an absolute, suffocating void of total sensory deprivation. And directly into that suffocating void, the doctor poured his endless, looped audio recordings. The mechanical reels spun endlessly. You killed your mother. It's your fault. The accusations played over and over again, echoing endlessly in the manufactured dark. This profound, engineered isolation successfully shattered whatever fragile psychological resistance the heavy chemical cocktails and brutal electroshocks had somehow missed. Trapped in the total, oppressive darkness, the isolated mind rapidly begins to consume itself. It hallucinates violently, generating terrifying flashes of light and color that aren't there. It frantically fabricates unimaginable, deeply personal terror simply to fill the overwhelming sensory emptiness of the room. The low, electrical humming of the hidden machinery provided a constant, sickening baseline to the psychological torture. Inside the sealed walls of the grid room, the distorted voice on the magnetic tape slowly becomes the only remaining reality. It terrifyingly transforms into the omnipotent voice of God. How long can a fragile human soul survive in the total, manufactured dark before it surrenders completely to the static? Who were the unfortunate, unsuspecting victims mercilessly sacrificed within the suffocating walls of the grid room? They were everyday people, like Velma Orlikow, a prominent politician's wife desperately seeking standard psychiatric treatment for her debilitating postpartum depression. Instead of receiving compassionate care, she was violently subjected to the horrors of the sleep room and the relentless, mechanical trauma of psychic driving. She originally checked into the hospital hoping for temporary relief. She eventually came out completely unable to read a simple sentence, unable to recall the faces of her own beloved children, her previously sharp mind reduced to a scrambled, broken puzzle of static and fear. There was also Linda McDonald, a healthy young mother who tragically forgot her entire past life. Following her devastating time in the experimental ward, she literally had to be retaught basic human functions: how to use a standard toilet, how to comprehend written words, how to cook a simple meal without burning the house down. These victims were perfectly ordinary citizens, unknowingly drafted into a highly classified, immensely cruel Cold War experiment focused entirely on total mind control. They trusted the confident man wearing the pristine white coat. They genuinely believed the prestigious Allen Memorial Institute was a safe, reputable sanctuary of medical healing. They had absolutely no idea they were actually disposable test subjects trapped inside a heavily funded psychological torture program. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a sickly, sterile glow over the cold linoleum floors, masking the true horrors occurring just behind the locked doors. Like and subscribe to keep your mind safe, because the reality of these experiments proves that the monsters don't always hide under the bed. Sometimes they carry clipboards and prescribe medication. The air in those hallways always carried the faint, chilling sterile smell of antiseptic and concealed cold sweat. When the trusted, highly decorated doctor slowly transforms into the ultimate, unpredictable monster, who do you frantically call for help when your own voice has been silenced? Why was a highly secretive intelligence agency so deeply, financially invested in the daily operations of a seemingly mundane Canadian psychiatric ward? It was the absolute, paranoid height of the tense Cold War. The pervasive, terrifying rumors of heavily brainwashed prisoners of war returning from Korea fueled a desperate, entirely immoral search for the ultimate weapon of mind control. The infamous Project MKUltra was officially born from this sheer, unadulterated panic. The specific operations known as Subproject 68 quickly became the doctor's own unholy, unregulated domain. The agency covertly funneled hundreds of thousands of untraceable dollars through a seemingly legitimate front organization, the deceptively named Society for the Investigation of Human Ecology, delivering the cash directly into the eager hands of the ambitious psychiatrist. The shadowy government officials didn't care at all about curing severe depression or treating anxiety. They strictly wanted to know if a functioning human being could be completely, irreversibly reprogrammed like a simple machine. Could you artificially wipe a strong mind completely blank and subsequently create a perfectly obedient, programmable assassin? Could you violently erase an enemy spy's deeply ingrained loyalty using nothing but massive jolts of electricity and endlessly looping audio tapes? These gruesome, unethical experiments conducted in the sterile smell of the hospital wards were the absolute closest they ever got to finding out the terrifying truth. The intelligence agency willingly paid for the paralyzing curare. They gladly paid for the heavy, mechanical tape recorders. They enthusiastically funded the deliberate, methodical destruction of innocent, unsuspecting lives. The humming lights of the underground bunkers perfectly mirrored the relentless, mechanical spinning of the magnetic tape reels. The terrified patients, drenched in cold sweat, were merely data points on a classified spreadsheet. What darker, far more terrifying secrets are still permanently buried within the heavily redacted, blacked-out files that the panicked officials never quite managed to fully destroy before the investigations began? Despite the brutal, shockingly clinical efficiency of the initial depatterning phase, the subsequent attempts at psychic driving ultimately proved to be a spectacular, devastating failure. The ambitious doctor could easily break a fragile human mind into a million jagged pieces, but he absolutely could not rebuild it back into a functional, coherent whole. The carefully engineered positive messages he eventually attempted to play over the speakers, the so-called repatterning phase, simply didn't stick to the violently erased, traumatized brains of his victims. The suffering patients didn't miraculously emerge from their chemical comas as newly minted, perfectly adjusted, obedient citizens. Instead, they tragically emerge as fundamentally broken, empty, hollow shells of humanity. They were reduced to wandering amnesiacs. Chronically anxious ghosts desperately searching for the fragments of their former, stolen selves. You can easily smash a complex computer hard drive into dust with a heavy steel hammer, but you certainly can't install a brand new operating system by simply shouting loudly at the shattered pieces. The entire, heavily funded experiment was a catastrophic, completely irreversible failure of basic medical ethics and fundamental human empathy. The doctor ultimately proved only one, singular, terrifyingly bleak thing, that it is shockingly, depressingly easy to permanently destroy a human person. The sterile smell of the hospital rooms forever lingered in the ruined memories of the survivors. But as the dark program quietly began to lose its secret funding and officially shut its doors, the profoundly damaged victims were simply discharged and sent back home. They were cruelly left entirely alone to blindly navigate the terrifying wreckage of their own artificially erased personal histories. The humming lights of their own living rooms now triggered terrifying, unexplainable panic attacks. They frequently woke up drenched in a freezing cold sweat, terrified by shadows they couldn't recognize. How do you possibly continue to live a normal life when the precious, irreplaceable memories that fundamentally make you human have been intentionally, violently burned away? When the darkest, most terrifying rumors of the highly classified MKUltra program finally began to slowly leak out into the mainstream press, the frantic, desperate scramble to completely hide the horrific truth immediately began. In the chaotic year of 1973, the deeply panicked director of the intelligence agency abruptly ordered all existing files related to the mind control experiments to be permanently destroyed. The extensive, damning paper trail of Subproject 68 was deliberately meant to vanish completely into the roaring flames of the agency's massive incinerator. The doctor who orchestrated the misery conveniently died of a sudden, fatal heart attack in 1967, ensuring he would never have to face a single, grueling day inside a public courtroom. His highly prestigious, carefully cultivated medical reputation remained fully, sickeningly intact long after his death. Meanwhile, the actual, living victims were tragically left behind to suffer with severely fragmented, broken memories. They endured agonizing, unexplainable flashbacks and massive, terrifying gaps of missing years in their lives. They were completely, frustratingly unable to verbally explain exactly why they instantly felt a deep, primal, paralyzing terror at the simple, mechanical sound of a tape recorder clicking on. The powerful medical institution quickly closed its ranks, fiercely protecting its own reputation above the lives of the patients. The highest levels of the government flatly and repeatedly denied absolutely everything. It was designed to be a perfect, flawlessly executed, entirely silent crime, supposedly committed in the twisted name of vital national security and groundbreaking psychiatric progress. The victims continued to suffer in silence, their nights plagued by the sterile smell of phantom hospitals and waking up drenched in a terrified cold sweat. The humming lights of the interrogation rooms were officially shut off, but the psychological damage was permanent. But a forced silence always leaves a lingering, unmistakable echo in the dark. What happens to the carefully constructed lies when the violently erased, forgotten victims finally start to slowly, painfully remember the truth? The horrifying, deeply buried truth absolutely didn't stay hidden in the dark forever. A small, miraculous handful of misfiled, highly sensitive financial documents inexplicably survived the director's desperate, sweeping purge of the agency's archives. Tenacious investigative journalists slowly began to aggressively pull at the bloody, tangled threads of the massive cover-up. The deeply traumatized victims, who had been quietly struggling for decades with unexplainable, profound amnesia and deep-seated, crippling trauma, slowly began to finally find each other in the aftermath. Velma Orlikow, along with several other brave survivors, officially launched a monumental, incredibly difficult civil lawsuit directly against the powerful intelligence agency. It became an agonizing, protracted legal battle of attrition. The seemingly limitless resources of the government ruthlessly fought them at absolutely every single step of the grueling process. The agency lawyers constantly attempted to completely dismiss the horrific claims, deliberately trying to maliciously run out the clock until the severely damaged, elderly victims simply died off before seeing justice. It ultimately took many long, painful years of relentless, exhausting litigation to finally drag the horrific, deeply clinical details of the infamous sleep room and the terrifying grid room directly into the blinding light of public scrutiny. The shocking revelations confirmed the worst fears, exposing the sterile smell of institutional betrayal and the cold sweat of systemic torture. But the psychological and neurological damage inflicted upon the innocent patients was entirely permanent. The eventual, heavily lawyered official apologies offered by the government were entirely hollow and utterly meaningless. The eventual financial settlements were sickeningly minuscule when directly compared to the vibrant, full lives that were so ruthlessly stolen from them. The sterile, humming lights of the courtrooms provided absolutely no real comfort to the broken survivors. The modern justice system, for all its power, simply cannot unplay the endless, damaging tapes. Can any realistic amount of financial compensation ever actually buy back a deliberately stolen, permanently fractured human mind? The massive, imposing structure of the Allen Memorial Institute tragically still stands tall today, dominating the skyline in Montreal. It remains a grim, deeply intimidating stone mansion perched ominously high on the hill, casting a long, dark shadow over the city. The infamous, terrifying sleep room is officially gone. The heavy, mechanical reel-to-reel tape recorders that once played the endless loops of despair are finally, permanently silent. But the horrific, lasting legacy of Subproject 68 and the brutal methodology of psychic driving firmly remains as a dark, permanent, indelible stain on the entire history of modern medical science. It serves as a terrifying, distinctly analog reminder of exactly what inevitably happens when absolute, unchecked institutional power happily marries absolute, arrogant scientific hubris. The highly respected doctor foolishly wanted to proudly play God with the fragile human mind, attempting to mold it like cheap clay. Instead, he only successfully created a localized, terrifying analog hell for completely innocent people seeking simple help. The victims were left permanently scarred, forever associating the sterile smell of basic clinics and the low, persistent buzzing of humming lights with pure, unfiltered terror, waking up decades later drenched in a terrified cold sweat. As we all move rapidly and blindly deeper into a modern era dominated by highly advanced digital algorithms and constant, endlessly looping social media consumption, we must seriously, urgently ask ourselves, are we still actively being driven? The underlying methods have certainly evolved significantly over the decades. The clunky magnetic tapes are entirely gone, seamlessly replaced by sleek, glowing digital screens that we voluntarily stare into all day. But the ultimate, underlying goal remains exactly, terrifyingly the same. To actively shape our thoughts. To subtly influence our desires. To quietly erase our individuality. The invisible reels are undoubtedly still spinning relentlessly in the dark, quietly feeding us our daily programming. They are just significantly quieter and far more insidious now. Are you truly paying attention, or are you just listening to the static?